if there's one thing that traditionally our breed of optometry people has been really good at, it's relationship building. I mean, that's why we as primary eye care providers build that trusted relationship with our patients. Our profession attracts that type of individual personalized attention and good, usually very good communication skills. You know, the other thing, Chris, that was really hard, I think, about this legislative battle with the students was that they were jazzed about scope. I mean, I got them to do just about anything for scope. And then we were like, managed care. And they were like, what do those words mean? I was like, vision plans. Things are just really not good. And let's fix this. And it was far more of an explanation. And they were like, okay, what is a vision plan doing that's so egregious, you know? And so we really had to do a lot of education.
Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with Dr. Jennifer Deakins and Dr. Tommy Lucas. We discussed the new Texas legislation that was recently passed related to non-covered services and managed vision care plans. And I think the most important thing within this is just the effort that it took to get this done. It is not an easy task, and it is not something that you can achieve without pretty significant grassroots effort. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. My patients with macular degeneration want clear and succinct recommendations from me related to products and solutions that can benefit their long-term ocular health and vision. To do this for my patients, I need to be confident that what I'm recommending will have a benefit to them. And that's why my supplement of choice is MacuHealth. MacuHealth is specifically formulated and clinically proven to rebuild and maximize macular pigment over a lifetime. This results in enhanced visual performance and aids in the treatment and prevention of age-related macular degeneration. I've discussed carotenoid absorption on this podcast with Dr. Nolans and Stringham, and MacuHealth uses a patented process called micromicelle technology. And this technology is clinically proven to increase carotenoid concentrations at the target tissue and deliver the highest level of bioavailability studied to date. MacuHealth has been great for my patients, and we really feel like we have the ability to help those patients in all categories of macular degeneration. If you're not utilizing MacuHealth for your patients, check it out for yourself by contacting your MacuHealth representative. The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com.
Obviously, thanks for taking your time to come on and record about this. But two, thanks for taking your time and all the efforts that have gone on in Texas for years and years. Tommy, actually, Jen and Tommy, you and I go back a long ways. I think, Tommy, when I first met you on SGRC, you guys in Texas were really trying to revamp your grassroots. And what I think you learn on SGRC, and you know this, but what I learned was, every state thinks they have their thing. Every state thinks that they're so unique compared to other states. And the reality is there is probably something that makes them unique, but everybody has a unique thing that they've got a hurdle that's going to make it hard for them. So first, we had John here today to talk mostly about your recent insurance act that was signed into law. But two, I want to kind of talk a little bit about what you have done over the last like 7 to 10 years to really build your network. Because I'll tell you, a lot of people think that insurance is an easier thing to pass than like scope of practice. And Jen, I see you nodding your head no, and I think that's absolutely true. I mean, it's probably a bigger animal to take down than scope of practices. So I'll pause there. Tommy, I'll let you start out just because you kind of helped build this grassroots effort, and talk about what it takes to do that in a big state like Texas.
Yeah, Chris, glad to be on with you today. It's been a minute since we've been able to catch up, but like you said, you and I kind of came up together a little bit in our advocacy efforts, serving on SGRC together with AOA, and I guess they put us on that committee because we were really active in our respective states at that time, and kind of kind of. So you've done a lot in your home state, and of course we got started with this project. I think I became ledge chair in like 2010 or 2011, somewhere right. Actually, that's not true. We were at the Capitol in 2011, kind of learning a little bit, and then I think I became ledge chair in Texas in 2012. So you're right. It's been 10, 11 years of consistent effort now. And like you said, we were in kind of, I guess, in a lull in Texas in terms of our kind of grassroots organization at the time. We had a lot of leadership that are mentors to me and Jen that had kind of been through all the scope fights and everything like that before us. And, those fights take a lot out of you, and you kind of move on in your career and move on to other things. So Texas was looking for kind of a new generation of political leadership at the time. And Jen and I both share a mentor that has been on this podcast before, Dr. Joe DeLoach. And he kind of found me and found Jen and got us involved in TOA, and the rest is history. So we've been kind of mounting a grassroots campaign ever since then, passing a lot of legislation and making sure that our doctors and our patients are treated fairly and have access to optometric care.
Yeah, I think that's the key. That as you're kind of getting into, like me, into the middle of your career, you're starting to have to look for other people. I mean, Jen, you're right with us, and you're starting to try to identify other people who can kind of succeed us. So tell me your process with that, Jen.
Yeah, I think Tommy's right. We had to revitalize because we had sort of the old guard and the leadership who had beaten the ground for so long. And I took notes from Tommy in that grassroots is as much personal relationships as anything else we do. So the complexity of the legislative process is murky and intense. And so our grassroots network had to trust us. And it takes work every single day to make sure that we are communicating with those key contacts and the larger membership body so that when we take a call to action, they trust that it's the right thing and they don't have to digest a 40-page bill to know that those merits are there, to know it's good for their practice and good for their patients. And so that's what we tried to do. We try to be, I really respect you, Chris, in the way that you've always communicated very honestly, very openly, and very sincerely. And I think that some of the great leadership in our profession does that. So we try to be real open and real honest. I had a tough run when I first came in as legislative chair. So Tommy was like, this is hard and I need, some help. So let's be two arms of the same person. And my first ledge session was a failure at the scope bill. I mean, it was a hard failure. And we had to come back from that. And we had our grassroots just convinced we were going to pass that bill. And then we had to revitalize again for the next scope fight, which we were successful and we were really proud of. We built on that grassroots momentum. And then as interesting as the next battle was for managed care and insurance laws, it spoke to different people in our grassroots network, but we didn't lose the momentum. I was scared of that because scope is sort of this really enticing, issue legislatively. and we all like to talk about it, and it's a really hot topic. And it can get a little more dry in the managed care land, but we were able to really hone in. And you're right, the managed care fight is wholly different. I felt like it was harder in many ways because there were just endless amounts of resources and money that these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates can throw at the battle. And it was more one-on-one with scope. And even though we didn't have endless coffers of PAC money to do it, what we had was a resilience in our doctors and a tenacity that the grassroots would not give up no matter what, and a belief in the process, a belief in the TOA, and really, harnessing those individual relationships we had built over 7, 8, or 10 years.
It's hard, Jen, because when you have a defeat like that right away, you worked really hard. I remember talking to you. Well, actually, I remember in that boardroom, Tommy, Jen. I mean, and I, we were remote, and it was almost like this like come to Jesus sort of moment where you're just like, well, holy cow, we didn't have what we thought we had. We didn't have the relationships we thought we had. We couldn't trust the people that we thought we could trust. And to see that you went through that early on and you had this resiliency of pushing through, I'll tell you, that's really unique, and it's very hard to do. So congratulations, Jen, to you, and also to Tommy, to kind of not letting it go and seeing the bigger picture and moving forward with what you learned. And so tell me about that process a little bit. So, my recollection, and this was years ago now, but my recollection was that the relationships that you had were not what you thought they were. And some of the people that were in key positions related to in the Senate and in the House, and maybe was the governor involved too? I can't remember. You could tell that story, but there were these key people that you thought you had good relationships with, and turns out that we didn't have those relationships. And so you can elaborate a little bit more on that if you'd like. But the other thing is, how did you overcome it? Like, I know that there was trust that was built, and that's very important. But there's one thing to say, I trust Jen, I trust Tommy. They're going to do great work. I'll follow them. And then there's another where I trust Jen, I trust Tommy. They're going to do great work, and I can't let them be alone. What did you do to get there?
Yeah, it's complicated because politics is complicated, right? And, you think your relationships are one thing, and you think your grassroots relationships in a random Senate district or a random House district are strong and unbreakable. And then reality sets in at the Capitol, and those particular politicians have relationships with the other side as well. And so it comes down to, our doctor may think they have a super strong relationship, but the way that it works is behind the scenes, complicated, horse trading. So, and, people down there in Austin will, even trade on their own friends without their knowledge. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. So, politics is kind of like an art form. Sometimes it's described as a dark art. And you kind of got to know, who's your real friend and who's not your real friend. And sometimes your real friend is not your real friend. And it's complicated. So that's where having like a professional, organized group like we've been able to, gather in Texas pays dividends, because in addition to our, 181 key contacts to our 181 legislators, we have a super professional lobby team. I would stack our lobby team up against anybody's team in Texas. Our TOA staff is just there to support us constantly. Our ledge committee is just, hundreds of years of combined experience in politics. And you really have to kind of think about the chessboard of what's going on down there under the dome, and realize that, it's a process, and that as you go through that process, there's 1,000 ways to kill a bill, and there's only one way to pass a bill. And you have to overcome every single one of those hurdles. So we go into every session, when we go into a session, we're really planning for that session 2 years in advance. Like as we speak right now, Jen and I are planning for 2 years from now about what we'll be going for and trying to accomplish. So the project for scope and the project for insurance started a decade ago when we first passed our first bill that was kind of like our organizational bill, if you will, like of regathering our grassroots mobility and strength and, seeing what we could accomplish against the political machine that is Texas politics, which is big money, big egos, that kind of stuff.
That's key too and Jen, you can elaborate on that a little bit more, but I wanted to jump in and just to say that, in some cases, like in Nebraska, for example, we have a unicameral. Everybody knows that's heard me talk. We have a unicameral, 49 senators. So you have a filibuster-proof bill. Actually, you have a veto and filibuster-proof bill, essentially with 34 votes. And so you can think, great, we can do anything. But what you're describing is like, okay, well, all we need is 34 really good relationships because you want to have a little bit extra, right? So, okay, 34 really good relationships. But we only have in Nebraska, we have probably 275 members in our association that you think, okay, well, we only have this many people and we got, 275. But Texas has how many optometrists?
Pushing 5,000. We're like 4,700, almost 5,000 docs. Yeah.
And so then you take the number of active docs or docs that are members of the association, or maybe dues paying members of the association, and then you have the active ones that are more active than paying dues. And so that 181 slots. It seems like, well, 5,000 totally we can manage 181, but it's not that easy. And so, Jen, kind of elaborate a little bit on that about how you pare down and know which key contact is going to be an effective key contact and the one that you want to pair up with them.
Yeah, it's a great challenge and one that we're proud to have worked very hard on. And one thing before I comment on how we did it, the mechanics, it's become even more complex in the political landscape that we have now and the very partisan politics that have played out. So we've even had key contacts come to us and say, look, I'm having a tough time. I don't agree with the social politics of this guy or that gal. And it's making it more challenging day by day. But I'm still proud of our doctors who are true to their roots as an optocrat, and we try to raise that in the early generations. I interact with students every day in my day job, and I try to explain to them very early on that our issues cut through that partisan politics. And that was demonstrated very well by our insurance, legislation that went through just recently, and that we garnered support from both sides and scope as well. But how we mechanically do it has become more sophisticated over the years. We used to sort of pull up Google Maps and pull all the zip codes in whatever district and, oh, that guy, do you know that one? You know that one? And they're really great and they're really good. And I've seen them show up to stuff. And now we still do that somewhat, but we have, there's Dr. Adam Parker out of Virginia created this incredible grassroots system called KP Dashboard. It's created by an optometrist for optometry. And Tommy and I have harnessed that. And I just love it. I'm on it every day communicating with my docs, and I can pull up a district by the stuff that he's uploaded, and I can put out a message saying, who knows this candidate who's running? Do you go to church with them? Are you in the PTA with them? Do your kids, play soccer with them? And we find more inherent relationships that way a lot of times, or just somebody steps up and says, I'm willing, who wouldn't otherwise have done so. And so we can text and email them at the touch of our fingertips. And so it's been really efficient. And then all that knowledge and all that relationship knowledge is stored in a database for our future. I mean, we can't do this forever. We got to find our next people too, eventually. So they'll have that knowledge that we've garnered and everything we've recorded, interactions between doctors and legislators for the future. And I think that'll be an enduring legacy, hopefully, that we can leave.
I think you meant, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, KP.
Go ahead, Tommy.
I was just going to add that KP Dashboard was a game changer for us in terms of organization. And, without that software, we were using 20 spreadsheets of, sort of accurate information. And it was just really difficult to coordinate in any meaningful way. So, now we're able to reach all of our doctors, all of our key contacts at the touch of a button. And that really, we deployed it in our very first, or our scope fight where we failed the first time. And then as we became more and more proficient and kind of power users of KP Dashboard, it's propelled us to our
I think it's
success.
a really good plug for KP Dashboard and for the work that Adam Parker has done, because we use it as well. And I think it's a very powerful tool, but it's not going to do the job for you. And I think your point, Jen, is for those who are using KP Dashboard, it is you're using it on a daily basis or a very regular basis to keep up with what's going on in all the different legislative districts, that upload information so everybody knows what's going on. But it's not going to do your job, but it is a great tool to help facilitate the efforts that you both have to go through in order to do that. One of the points that I think is interesting, Tommy, on a recent SGRC call that I was kind of staggered back a little bit by, but was that there was a state that had a very well-known legislator who had quite a bit of political clout within the state, and the students and they were going to carry their scope bill. And this is to your point, Jen, about optocrats is I have very strong personal beliefs about certain things. And yet I can try to find common ground with legislators where those beliefs differ. But the students were almost in a boycott against the association because they viewed the beliefs of the sponsor of their scope bill, somebody who is out there going to go to battle for your profession, as unacceptable to carry their bill. And I thought, holy cow, like, put everything else aside. Now, maybe there are some things, and I think there probably are some things that are more important. But the reality is unless you are going to be able to remove that politician or figure out a way to circumvent that politician, somebody that has a lot of political clout, that also believes in the profession, that you might differ on something else with, that is going to be completely inconsequential to what is going to happen in the legislature on this specific year. I just couldn't believe the things that I was hearing that the students were doing. I was like, this is not good. So how do you get over that? What's the message that you do to get over that?
So we encounter it a lot right now. And the way that we've tried to see it is just shaping the conversation and harnessing that energy, because they have very passionate beliefs. And so we try to temper the current political climate of our state with, hey, you guys have a fire in your belly, and let's put that energy towards getting the person elected, that you make that friend early. You want somebody elected in that position, go fight for them. Don't fight against us as the TOA and what we're doing, but go fight for that person, because if they're a viable candidate, then they are going to know that you supported them from the very beginning. So that's really what we're trying to do in Texas. And I think it's working. And we're planning some student forums for the fall where we bring in both, D and R legislators to talk about the reality of the campaign season is, pretty ugly and political, but often when you're making the laws that matter to Texas businesses or some of Texas healthcare and different things, we cut through some of that partisan stuff. So I think if they hear from the legislators themselves, that helps too. And so we have a PR firm that we employed that's going to bring some of those guys in and do some forums with the students, because we've got 2 optometry schools in Texas. And so it's very important to us that they have that exposure early on, and that we guide that mindset. And I think it's getting there. We see people mostly responsive. Would you say, Tommy?
Yeah. The political discourse in our country now is, in our faces 24/7. So, everyone's got an opinion, and the folks that kind of used to be in the middle on things have kind of gravitated one direction or the other. So that's leaked into, what you would call special interest politics or advocacy efforts for a group like ours. And it's difficult, to be honest. But, I think almost everyone has some type of aha moment when it comes to politics. And what I mean by that is, like, you finally understand how politics really works. And if you're there to advocate for, a cultural issue or one of the big kind of topics that's out there, that's one thing. If you're there talking about local issues or professional issues or things that impact your livelihood. That's, you kind of have to separate that from that bigger picture and understand that the politicians down there are multifaceted folks. They're getting elected in their primaries generally, by saying and believing certain things. But when you get down there, they're dealing with random issues about, infrastructure and water and, things that are actually important to society, beyond just like what you would see kind of like the cultural type stuff. So, but it's hard to overcome, but you have to kind of like get those folks to understand that, hey, this particular person, and we've gone through this, we pick strong sponsors that are strong for a reason, because they've amassed power in some way. And, but they're also, out there on a lot of cultural issues. So you really have to kind of separate that and, get your young folks to understand that, hey, you still have to be an optocrat when it comes to this. I know you don't like this particular stance or what you heard from this politician, but, you're never going to have a perfect political candidate that aligns with your beliefs 100%. So you got to kind of lose that naivety.
I think Jen, you said it really well is, and I want to highlight this point is, it only really it only makes a difference when you're behind the eight ball. Like if you have very strong political beliefs, right, which I do, then I'm going to work the heck out of people for campaigns for people that I have that belief, like I share those beliefs with, I share those political positions with, and then if there's somebody else in my same district that has an opposing political belief for the opposing side, then somebody's going to win, right? And ultimately, either they get their guy in or I get my guy in, but we have the relationship. And it's not, and so now you're talking about building the relationship from the ground up, and you're helping people who you really want in general, from a political standpoint in general, that also now has a relationship with an optometrist that they're going to listen to when they need insight about eye care issues. And so I think that's the message that needs to really resonate is like, look, you might not like the sponsor of this bill, but if you don't like the sponsor of this bill, then guess what? There's 180 other legislators that need to be elected. And there's probably somebody in 2 to 4 years that are going to run against them. So find somebody you really like and work for them. And then, we still have other people that have opposing beliefs outside of optometry. And if we've got somebody working for them as well, then then optometry wins either way and our patients win either way. And so I think that's the message is a lot of times we're coming to the game too late. So we're trying to be picky on the people that we're having, as opposed to like, we just want relationships. Like all we need is a relationship. You can worry about all that other stuff that matters, right? That might really matter to you personally. And it might really be a big deal personally and also politically across the country or in your state. But that's okay, because if you've built the relationship early, then that's what matters. That's the really important thing. And so anyway, I think that's the message I get. And I think you hammered it, Jen, is that look, focus those efforts to get the people that you want elected because they align with your beliefs in general. And when they align with your beliefs in general, if you have a relationship with them, they will listen to you once they're elected, right? They're going to take because they're going to want your insight because you know more than they do about that.
Yeah. And I think if there's one thing that traditionally our breed of optometry people has been really good at, it's relationship building. I mean, that's why we as primary eye care providers build that trusted relationship with our patients. Our profession attracts that type of individual personalized attention and usually very good communication skills. The other thing, Chris, that was really hard, I think, about this legislative battle with the students was that they were jazzed about scope. I mean, I got them to do just about anything for scope. And then we were like, managed care. And they were like, what do those words mean? I was like, vision plans. Things are just really not good. And let's fix this. And it was far more of an explanation. And they were like, okay, what is a vision plan doing that's so egregious, And so we really had to do a lot of education, not really to our doctors, because I think that even whatever mode of practice you're in, it really matters to you. You're interfacing with the vision plan managed care world in so many ways. And because we had taken scope forefront for 6, 7, 8 years, those managed care issues had bottled up for us and, in Texas. And so we took note of that over time. And it was such a comprehensive package. We carefully explained it to our students. They got on board, we explained it to our doctors, and now we're explaining the implementation phase of that, which is just as complex as the bill itself, and setting realistic expectations. But Tommy and I believe that, I don't want to overstate it, but it really may define the survival in Texas of independent practice. And I don't mean just private practice. We mean the independent judgment of doctors, patient choice in who they go to as their eye doctor, access to good doctors all across the state. So it was really pivotal legislation for us.
Getting young presbyopes in progressive lenses can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Verilux Liberty 3.0 lenses are an introductory solution for emerging presbyopes, and they're available in select ad powers. This lens provides an all-in-one balanced vision solution for an accessible and great first-time progressive lens wearing experience. Learn more about Verilux Liberty 3.0 lenses and get free resources to help start the progressive lens conversation with your young presbyopes at slorepro.com/Verilux. I want to discuss the MyDay toric contact lens for a minute. When I'm reaching for a daily lens for my patients, I need to know that it will be available in parameters that I want, and it needs to work. This improves my chair time and my patient satisfaction. The MyDay toric features the same optical lens design features as the most prescribed monthly replacement toric lens on the market. MyDay toric now completely mirrors the Biofinity toric's parameter range. To be clear, if you find the parameter in a Biofinity toric, you can find it in a MyDay toric. This toric lens design is multifaceted to ensure optimal visual acuity, lens stability, fit, and comfort. Its uniform horizontal ISO thickness and wide ballast band quickly orient the lens for better performance and simplified fitting. The MyDay material is CooperVision's softest one-day silicone hydrogel lens and features Aquaform technology combining a unique balance of high oxygen permeability and natural wettability. The result is a highly breathable lens that keeps our patients' eyes looking clear, white, and healthy. So if you haven't started utilizing MyDay toric in your practice, I'd encourage you to reach out to your CooperVision representative to get started.
We've been watching the vision managed care plan space for, 2 decades now of kind of watching the industry and seeing how things have been shaking out. And there's a whole history there that we could go into about how we wound up here. But and I'm happy to go into some of that. But ultimately, what Jen described is, we're kind of in a modern day battle for the independent nature of the doctor-patient relationship at this point. Is there a sanctity to that anymore, or are we kind of servants of the person's plan at this point, and is the plan making the decisions about what should or what does happen? So that's kind of where we are now. Happy to talk about more.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'd like to go next. Is I want to talk about because we could do. We could do episode after episode after episode discussing how we got to where we are from a managed vision care standpoint. And you and I may completely disagree about where we go from a standpoint of how do we look at a managed vision care. Jen, your point about, just training students, teaching them about like, what are we talking about when we say managed vision care plan and X, Y, and Z? And actually, it's kind of fun because one of my visions about I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years ago was to really create a course for students that would follow them from year 1 all the way into year 4. So by the time they're done with school, it's not like, hey, I got 3 hours of billing and coding and third party stuff in my 4th year. They know it. And actually, we have a school now that is on board that we've been developing for, which is applicable to any school that wanted to jump in. So the point is that day one of their schoolwork, they are going to have access now to basically modules that will come to them over time. So the goal is that by the time that they get to fourth year, not only do they understand the nuances between 9.9 codes and 9.2 codes and the differences between managed vision care and medical care, but they'll actually, the goal is that they're going to build how do they actually implement disease state management and comprehensive care. They're going to do that on their own. Like they're going to know how to do that by the end. So they're going to come out of school with a lot more understanding of those two things. And I only make that point because it takes a couple visionary people at some schools where they see that, like, oh yes, we do need to. They know it's an issue, right? But students come out so well trained that in the management of ocular disease and the management of patients, but the implementation of that in a practice, if they don't have a mentor right now, if they don't have a mentor, then they'll flounder. And that's why it's so important when you think about from a regulatory and legislative standpoint that if the managed vision care plan owns that patient and the doctors who are coming out of school don't understand how to communicate about those differences and the nuances between the type of care that they need and understand how to implement those things, then they're going to flounder. And they're going to be pushed in the wind for the big old managed vision care plans that are going to do what they want to do. And then the doctor's sitting here thinking, I just want to take care of patients. I just want to serve my patients. And then they get frustrated and then they sell their practices or they go to work for big conglomerates where they don't think they have to work for that, but they have zero control of everything else and blah, 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 blah. I mean, we could go on and on. Okay. And I would. I maintain myself because I'm on a soapbox. But I see that as a frustration all across the country. It's not just students, it's doctors, right? I mean, there's doctors that are my age that are completely burned out because they feel like they have no control. I talked yesterday to Paul Williams. I'm not sure if you guys know Paul, but I say yesterday, it'll be his episode will probably come out a week or two before your episode. But one of the things we did a bonus episode also because we had just started talking on the back end about something else, and he's 60 years old, I think, and he said, "I love practice, Chris. I don't want to stop practicing." And I'm thinking, well, I've talked to a number of people who are 40. You know, I just turned 42 yesterday, and they're in their 40s or late 30s, and they are done. I've talked to people who've been out for 2 years and they're not practicing anymore. And you're just like, what the heck is going on? This is crazy. So I say all of that to say, tell me about this, about the managed vision care plan, the managed vision care legislation that you guys implemented. How does that help with preventing burnout, continuing independence? I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's all the stuff that we have to rein back every day too, because we feel very much the same way. And, you know, when you're teaching students about this complexity of managed care, I think the other thing you're teaching them from an early point, and some of what we've lost in the young generations of ODs, is what is the value of our care and how do you stand up for that? And how do we value it? And how do you allow other people to define the value of it? And so I know the AOA has been talking about that, and we've been really in tune to the message and how we bring that to our doctors and then to the public at large. It's a big lift, I think that we talked about preserving independent practice, but really our legislation does three key things. It makes sure that patients have access to the independent eye care doctor of their choice in their community. I think it increases or allows the continuation of competition in the market. With the vertical integration and the massive consolidation of the industry, if you have a variance of small independent practices, mid-sized practices competing, it's good for the industry. It's good for healthcare costs overall. If you have one or two multi-billion-dollar conglomerates providing all the care and setting the standard and setting the prices, which is where kind of it's integrated with the vision plan world, right? This consolidation, that's not good overall for the industry. And then a third thing is, like I said, proper valuation of care for the future. Otherwise, we're just headed in the wrong direction. And so Tommy can get into a few of the specifics of how the bill does that. I mean, there's like 19 or 20 different tenets, And we started with the base of our non-covered services bill, but we found out that creative companies found all kinds of ways around the broad laws that we had passed of thou
We've
shalt
seen
not
that, yeah, across the
control.
country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Just really kind of ways
Mhm.
that were, it was creative in a bad sort of way, that we said thou shalt not control the practice of optometry, but what is the control of the practice? And we had to really go at defining that. And we'll probably have to be cleaning it up for the years to come too. Tommy?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we thought we had this issue kind of nipped in the bud in 2015. We passed in 3 successive sessions, piecemeal bills about non-covered services and lab choice. When we passed our lab choice in 2015, it actually had another part of the bill that we called the kind of the vision plan bill of rights at that point, or the it kind of mirrored our practice act, where a a doctor had certain rights, basically, as they were practicing optometry. Well, we kind of mirrored that to say that, hey, a vision plan or a managed care plan, which in Texas, a managed care plan is both a medical plan and a vision plan in our statute, cannot violate the optometrist's rights either. So we passed some really strong language in 2015 that said, basically, a managed care plan, thou shalt not control the practice of optometry. And it said it basically in those words. But as Jen described, the devil was in the details. We passed that, and then we expected the world to shift and change because you can't control the practice of optometry anymore. And then the plans just look at us and say, well, that's great, Tommy, but what's control? So that's the question that they ask back to us. What do you define as control? Well, so we spent a lot of years thinking about that. What is control? And we came up with a long list of things that we define as control of optometry and control of the optometric practice. And those are kind of the provisions and tenets in our bill now. It's a lot to go through. Jen and I just did an hour-long webinar, the other night to all of our doctors describing those. So there's kind of 19 key provisions in our bill. A lot of the major tenets of the bill, or some of the bigger tenets of the bill, involve the steering of patients to self-owned plans. So many of the vertically integrated conglomerates are making a concerted effort to push patients into the retail locations that they own or the doctor's offices that they prefer. So we banned that. We banned certain aspects of the tiering of doctors. And tiering is not completely prohibited, but it's prohibited in instances where the tiering is happening because of how much product you're buying from a particular company, or what products you're choosing to buy, what dollar amount, what percentage amount, things of that nature. In the healthcare world now, it is a big movement to describe the possibility of tiering of doctors based on quality measures.
I think, on the one hand, quality measures really could potentially give, and this is a lot what Paul and I were talking about, is it could give some doctors a huge and a meaningful leg up over other doctors. But is the quality measure, I take care of glaucoma by doing no visual fields and no OCTs. And when I bill glaucoma, I know we're talking about vision care, but when I bill a glaucoma patient, my quality care is the patient has moderate glaucoma, but I'm just cheaper because I didn't do those tests, or did I have just better outcomes? And the same thing comes into like quality metrics. So that's a very hard one to wrap your mind or wrap, maybe is quality care because we use companies in our office that we think are the best, right? We believe they're the best. Does that mean that if one company one lens company owns a vision care company, and they view their products as the best, as being better quality? Well, and actually, like, you could use everybody's thinking about the elephant in the room, but the reality is take any company that you want, right? Any lens company, any frame company, big or small, and they obviously think their stuff is the best. So it could be any of those companies, and then and then another company that might be a small managed vision care company, but they sort of align themselves with one of these other entities, and they say, well, ours is the best. That's quality. So that's a real challenge to define.
It is, yeah.
It is. And in Texas, our legislature grappled with this on the biggest of scales. The medical association and the insurance lobby, were trying to figure out what quality measures are this particular session, and they didn't really come up with a solution. So, and you look at CMS and what they're doing, and it's still kind of an undefined space at this point. But really, like in optometry context, it gets even more complicated because not only are we providing medical care, but we're providing vision care. So, in one context, quality care can be defined with outcomes from a medical perspective, but then when you're talking about how do you define quality when you're talking about a wellness, routine eye exam? For lack of a better,
it's a
phrase,
horrible phrase.
It's a whole big thing.
It's a whole I've been obsessing over this. Kyle Clutie and I have been really obsessing over this for the last year. We call it this comprehensive exam. The AOA talks about a comprehensive exam, but our managed vision care plans are not looking at it the same way as we are trained to look at a comprehensive exam. And we resist that temptation. I mean, on the one hand, and this is kind of another aside, but on one hand, you're almost like, well, look, I know the standard of care for us from the AOA is to do a comprehensive exam as defined by the AOA, right? As defined by what we would think of, and even CPT. But your managed vision care plan, you're not paying me to do that. And so really, it almost comes down to like this practice. It's this philosophy of the practice, like really understanding when a patient comes in with a managed vision care plan, what are they wanting from us? How do we do that thing really efficiently and effectively, and then communicate with the patient that, yeah, that's great, but like there's all these other medical issues you've got, and I can't do them under that because that's not what they're there for. It doesn't mean you can't have that disease state, and I can't see you for that. It's just that's not what they're asking me to do, and thus that's not what they think they're paying for. And we as a profession have to understand that. And when I've been in rooms with big wigs and like the biggest people in these insurance plans that you're talking about, and I'm sure you have as well, and I have asked them, what do you want when a patient comes in with glaucoma or glaucoma suspect and comes in and needs a new prescription for their glasses? What do you want me to do? And they'll say, what's the patient's chief complaint? And then you come to the chief complaint and they'll say, well, we want you to prescribe them the glasses, do their routine examination. And then right out of their words, you know what they say? Have them back for a more in-depth evaluation of their glaucoma risk. And none of us want to do that, but that's exactly what they're telling us to do, right? It's exactly what they say they're paying us for.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
it's
another
complex.
side, but it is complex.
No, it is complex. It's endlessly complex, or it feels that way, Chris. But I think the most important thing as we make the sausage here, and as this goes on for the next 5, 7, 10 years, and we set those standards, we cannot let someone else define it for us.
Yeah.
So we have to step up and be at the table and be loud and be present. Otherwise, the layman whose interests may be more for profit and growth of an entity is going to be over us who care for patients every day. And so I think, and run small businesses. So as long as we're present, I have maybe this stupidly optimistic belief that we can get to a place. But if we lay docile and let it happen to us, it's not going to look good for us or for patients.
So there's two issues I want you guys to hit on before we close this up. The first one is, does your law, I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to extrapolate on that. There's really two main issues that drive optometrists crazy related to managed vision care plans. And like you said, Jen, we've let it happen to ourselves. And I think that puts this position of like, well, adversarial with this managed vision care plan. I don't view it that way, really. I view it like they are part of the marketplace. They're part of what patients want. They're part of an access point for patients. It's what we do with those patients once they're in our practice that allows us to take the best care of the patient that we can. And as long as we have control over that as long as the doctor-patient relationship is not interrupted, then it's up to us. It's incumbent upon us to be able to educate the patient that's in our practice, et cetera, et cetera. So there's really two things that I think are big burdens in people's minds. The first one is is that they're not getting compensated for the things that they're doing appropriately for their services. The second one is what you've alluded to as I want to have choice in where I can go to get access for different care. And that care in this case would be different products. So tell me about how that pans out in this bill. And if one isn't addressed, how do we address that?
Yeah. I'll take the first one and Tommy can build on that. So the first way that we see it as making sure that proper valuation of care is maintained and that we have that ability to have that in the future is looking at specifically how do you reimburse doctors that make choices for patients and how do you reimburse them differently? So are you penalized for making choices for a patient that you think is best? Well, that is outlawed in the bill. Your reimbursement schedules can't be different for doctors that make different business decisions and purchase different amounts of product from plans per se or different companies. So that's one thing, is leveling that playing field and letting patients make the decision and letting doctors in each individual practice set their own prices. The other thing is really tightening down on that non-covered services. So if you would like to provide a value service for a patient that's not under their plan and you and the patient decide it's right, then that practice, per market standards, sets the price for that, not a plan that provides no reimbursement to the doctor. So specifically, if there's a covered service or product, if there's a service or product provided by the doctor to the patient, it cannot be considered covered unless there's reimbursement from the plan to the doctor. And then it has to be at a significant value. It can't be at a value of a penny or, 5 cents. And so those kinds of things will be important in maintaining that proper valuation of care and helping our doctors understand that they make those decisions with the patient. Tommy?
Yeah, agree. And the second part of your question, Chris, is, about choice and access. And, really it goes back to what you said a few minutes ago about the marketplace in general. Obviously, choice is going to be maintained and access is going to be maintained when you have a robust marketplace of people that provide this particular service. And just like you mentioned that, doctors are leaving the profession or consolidating or, choosing not to, become small business owners in ways that, we haven't seen in this profession in its history. All those factors are leading to that consolidation that the conglomerates are taking advantage of. And in many, locations around Texas, there may be one or two or three, practices in a mid-sized city. And, when those particular practices sell or when they feel the need to sell or they're in a panic because their profit margins are being reduced, point by point by point every year as they're watching their P&L, they panic. And then, so ultimately what happens? Well, they sell, that particular town ends up having one place to go that's owned by this company. And then that's what you have at the end of the day, called a monopoly. So, we're dealing with little mini local monopolies, all across the country and in small towns and mid-sized cities. And that's being hastened by the actions of the managed care plans. And then on the grandest of scale, like when you look at the U.S. market, we're kind of dealing with a duopoly, where the two largest vision plans control 70% of the market and are steering over 200 million Americans, into choices that they may not fully understand why they're making these choices. They just know that this is the cheapest or this is the only one around. So ultimately what our bill does is takes all of those dynamics and kind of shifts the conversation a little bit. The vision plans are going to have to kind of look at this holistically and decide who they are and what they want to be. So, historically, vision plans were a plan. They were a benefit plan. As competition arose between the two giants, they felt the need to compete with one another, and then the optometrists that provide the service have become afterthoughts, and they've devalued our services during that competition process. So, is it good to have 70% of the market tied up and controlled by two companies? Is it good to have 90% of the market controlled by the top 4 or 5 companies? That's what we're really dealing with. And, from a provider perspective now, the TOA Texas, we've pushed back on that now. this bill is innovative. It shifts the conversation into making the plans decide, hey, you're going to have to treat the optometrist fairly at the end of the day if you want them to participate in the system. So that's kind of where the valuation of our services comes in. These are high profit companies, they make a lot of money, and they're going to have to decide how to allocate that profit in a more responsible way if they want the system to be.
I think it really levels.
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
It levels the playing field for in-network providers, right? If you choose to take vision plans, you are not at a competitive disadvantage inherently by just wanting to be a small business that provides care to your patients in your communities, which we have, small and large in Texas. And I think at the end of the day, one of the protections the bill provides is specifically is immediate online electronic access to out-of-network benefits, which we saw clamp down on in a big way. And so if a business decides, if a practice decides that it's best for them to be out of network for plans, then they can do so. I think a lot of optometrists want to stay in and needed these guardrails to be able to compete and provide for patients appropriately. But if you do choose that that's the best route for your practice and your patients, now you can help your patient utilize out-of-network benefits, which is really the standard for insurance and managed care. I mean, when you sign up for a medical plan, these are not benefits that are hidden from you. And so we put that in the bill that for the doctor and the patient, you have to be able to access those immediately online.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's almost like, if you were going to liken, because I'd never thought about it this way, but if you're going to liken the existing model within managed vision care and hiding benefits, it's almost like the HMO model. Like, we're going to make it so hard for you to see somebody outside of our network that practically speaking, you're never going to see anybody outside of our network. And that's one of the frustrations in a lot of cases with an HMO. And now you're making it in Texas a little bit more like a PPO network where, you have access. It might be, we can control costs. You're not going to have to spend more than your $10 copay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you choose to go outside of your network, we'll still cover those things. There's just a little bit different mechanism, and we can't control your spend as much. And you both and I know that practically speaking, you can probably deliver a patient out of network benefits for as much and maybe even less than they get with their in-network benefits in many cases.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So between that issue, doctors are really going to have to look at their provider contracts. Most doctors, sadly, don't even read them. They just kind of think, hey, I need to be in this plan because, otherwise I'm not going to be able to have access to these patients. But you're really going to need to look at those contracts and decide if it's a good business decision going forward. I would say in the old days, you could just sign a contract and know that you were going to be able to profit in your small business in a way that makes sense. But now that may not be the case anymore. You really need to kind of decide if the profitability of that plan is worth signing up for. Additionally, we had the issue where plans were still applying chargebacks to doctors' reimbursements, even when that doctor, like in Texas, is a lab choice state. So, a doctor chooses to use the lab of their choice. Well, some of the plans, not all of them, but some of them were still acting like they were the ones providing the cost of goods for the materials and still subtracting those reimbursements or those amounts from the overall reimbursement. So I think we're the first state in the country to ban improper chargebacks when a doctor has opted out of a particular lab that the plan is trying to encourage the doctor to use. So there's a lot of innovation in the bill itself. I think it's a bill that other states will look at, and they'll hopefully emulate some of it. They'll probably perfect some of it. Sadly, when you're a first mover on a lot of these things, you're also the first person to get a response from. Yeah. And Chris, you and I have experienced that in the past with legislation. We've led on a lot of issues over the last 10 years in this managed care space, and since then the different states have innovated, and that's kind of what the process is for. And we have AOA, working really hard on this now with the Doc Access Act. On a federal level, we need the Doc Access Act so that the provisions of lab choice and non-covered services will apply to ERISA plans and not just, plans that are regulated by states. So all of these factors taken in unison, I think if we have our state associations and the AOA all working on this managed care space, which I feel for the first time that there's a harmony going on around this issue, then I think we can make a real difference here. And I really think this system can continue. Jen and I both would say too that, we work with the vision plans and we don't even consider them adversarial in many ways. There's a philosophical side of this that we've discussed, during this podcast, but then there's the practical side of, hey, how do we take care of these 300 million Americans basically? And 200 million of them have these plans, and we want to work in unison and have cohesion with the plans that make sense. But we can't have the plans, trotting on the doctor either and forcing them out of business or forcing them into compromising their ethics. In terms of the doctor-patient relationship.
Well, listen, I don't know any better way to summarize that, Dr. Lucas, than what you just did. So, Dr. Deakins, Dr. Lucas, thanks so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. You're going to get a lot of people reaching out to you. Where can they get a hold of you?
The easiest way to contact Jen and I is just calling the TOA. You can Google the Texas Optometric Association and call the number. And that'll get folks in touch with us. And
awesome.
Yeah,
well, thanks guys for your time today. Thanks for all your hard work. I know we'll connect soon. Appreciate it.